Welcome back, everyone. Time to do another little comparison, or a full one actually, between the newly released M1 MacBook Pro and the somewhat older 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro, or that 15-inch one as well. It really doesn't matter. I will tell you though, that M1 MacBook Pro, if you get that one, it's going to future-proof yourself like crazy. It is worth the money. It is worth the wait for a couple of days if you want to pick it up, but it isn't necessarily a priority. It isn't the best MacBook for everyone, and it isn't even like something that you should go and jump to right now, because if you wait just a couple of months or even like maybe a year, if you can wait that long, these next M1 MacBooks that are coming out, the 16-inch M1 MacBook, the potential, 4 USB Type-C port M1 MacBook, or even the M1 iMac, those are going to be some crazy Mac machines that you might want to just hold off and just wait if you can. But this 2018 MacBook Pro, I will tell you, was a pretty good machine at that time, but it was plagued, it was plagued by that one issue that, in my opinion, that was probably one of the worst things that Apple has ever designed, which is that butterfly keyboard. If you aren't too familiar, these specific MacBooks from the 2016 to about that 2019 timeframe, these 13-inch ones all had that butterfly keyboard mechanism. So they switched away from their scissor switch keyboards. And by doing that, they actually had this issue where for some reason, the keys on the keyboard might actually end up typing extra keys by accident. They would get stuck. Sometimes they wouldn't function. And the keyboard is half of the functionality. One of them is the mouse. The other is the keyboard. These things are touchscreens. So we have to rely on those two things. And if the keys don't work properly, the MacBook's not going to work properly unless you plug in like a third-party keyboard or something. And even at that point, I'm sure a lot of people would rather use a stock Mac keyboard than the other way by using, their other. Now, Apple did, go ahead and, start up their own, recent recall program, and a lot of people ended up fixing it. And even then, sometimes they would get unfixed and they would, break up and stuff. And what I can tell you is that, in my opinion, it's just too much of a hassle. It's just too much wishy-washy stuff. And I would honestly tell everybody who's in that situation just to go pick up the M1 MacBook. It's a far better machine than the 2018 MacBook, just based off that one little thing. But when you also factor in the fact that the M1 MacBook Pro is a far better machine in pretty much every single category, it's just a no-brainer in my opinion. Now, there's a couple different models of the 2018 MacBooks, and like I said before, the 13-inch and the 15-inch, but even then there's different models for the 13 and 15-inch ones. There's a 13-inch models with 2 USB Type-C ports, then there's the one with 4 USB Type-C ports. Now, with that 15-inch MacBook Pro with the Retina display, the 2018 one, that is a pretty good machine. You have 16 gigs of RAM. I think you can go up to 32 on that machine as well. And that one has a lot of capability. It has that beautiful display, has Touch ID, and these MacBooks are still completely functional. Like, yes, you only have that, 2.3 gigahertz quad core for those base models, or even dual core for some, but you still have a lot of capability. You can still use those USB Type-C ports for, external displays and displaying this and that. And the functionality, I will say, is more or less the same. It's just the M1 MacBook Pro is the faster model. So that's one cool thing about it. However, the downside of it is that there's only the dual core model. You can always upgrade the, storage and, all these other things, but you're not getting that quad core USB Type-C option that you are with getting Intel MacBooks, or also these 2018 ones. So that's another big thing to keep in mind. Again, it may not be a deal breaker to a lot of people, but that's also one thing that I was telling people to go ahead and wait before you go and get that M1 MacBook. Because if you can even use your 2018 MacBook for a little bit longer until Apple goes ahead and, upgrades their 4 USB Type-C option MacBooks, then you're probably going to be in a way better position for 100% of a fact. So that's one reason why I was saying that. But realistically, everything about them, the way they feel, the screens, everything is pretty much exactly the same. I think these new ones get True Tone now, but like other than that, they're almost identically the same for the, most part. Both same have the, touch bars. The fingerprint sensor is now disconnected from the, touch bar as well as the escape key. So that's another thing, people may like that more. But the keyboard, like I said, is the bigger thing. They now switched back to that scissor mechanism kind of, rather than the butterfly keyboard for sure. So that's another huge thing. Now the software experience is going to be exactly the same. Both are running macOS, still getting the same updates. Now realistically, the future of both of these, beyond just a software standpoint, the new software experiences, with macOS and macOS 11 and 12 and all those ones, every single update we're getting, I feel like within the next year are going to be great for both MacBooks, but these M1 MacBooks are going to be able to do things and have certain key aspects that are going to really separate them from those standard Intel MacBooks. Now, I'm not too sure exactly what Apple is going to bring. If I had to assume, I'll probably say, like such a much easier way of actually, importing and playing iPhone games or iPad apps and all these different things into your MacBook. Right now, it's still kind of a weird process, but I feel like once more and more people get their hands on the M1 MacBooks, Apple's going to release some crazy software updates that may just make it even easier for us to install iOS apps on our MacBooks. That's going to be crazy for me. There are some ways to go about doing it now, but the M1 lineup is what Apple's spending most of their money on. So that's a huge way to look at it. These Intel-based MacBooks, Apple's kind of phasing them away. So there's no point they're going to, be spending much more money into, developing newer, crazier things for these Intel MacBooks when Apple could spend more money and even potentially save money by making their own chipsets and investing research into, furthering their M1 lineup. So I feel like that's going to be some crazy things that Apple is going to be doing in the future. So the future of the M1 MacBooks is more there than the future of these Intel MacBooks, including the 2018 model. So that's a big thing to keep in mind. However, another kind of funny thing is that you can still do 8 or 16 gig of RAM options for both these, MacBooks. So if you're into that, then that's perfectly fine. You can always go up to 16 gigs on the 2018 one as well if you need to. You have SSDs built into both, so there's not really that big of a deal there. But price per dollar standpoint, these 13-inch MacBooks have gone down in value quite a bit. They maintain their value too, but these 2018 ones, I've seen a lot of them for around like $700 to $800, even cheaper than that for these 13-inch models. And granted, you're not getting like the craziest, fastest performing machine ever, but for somebody who, needs to go on, go off to college, or they need to go do, some projects, and they don't need, a lot of processing power from their machine, if they're doing a lot of work, but if all those work consist of, Word documents and PowerPoints and different things like that, this 2018 one is going to be perfectly fine, bro. An iPad will pretty much do everything you need to do on it for that matter. But if once you start taking it up a notch and you start, playing heavier intensive games and you do all these other, video editing and things, these new M1 MacBooks are not made for that per se, but they're going to be able to handle more of a workload than these standard 2018 model MacBooks. And even though it has, less RAM than that 15-inch MacBook for those base models, you're still going to be having, I think, a better and smoother and faster performance from that M1 MacBook than the 2018 model, to be completely honest. And that's a very, very important thing to say. Like I stated, it's kind of like Android versus iOS. For an Android phone, you may have an Android phone that has like 10 gigabytes of RAM versus the iPhone 12 Pro that has, 6 gigabytes of RAM. Yet the iPhone 12 Pro is much faster, much smoother, and can pretty much handle more than what that Android phone can do because of the chipsets inside. It's almost the same thing here. Even though both are MacBooks, one has an Apple-based chipset, one has an Intel-based chipset. And because of that, the 2020 M1 MacBook Pro is definitely going to run circles around this 2018 MacBook. Also, on top of that, another very, very important thing that I always have to say, for these older MacBooks, including the 2018 model, they always ramp up their fans like crazy. I think there was a lot of thermal throttling going on for these specific MacBooks included. And for some reason, Apple just keeps these fans on all the time. And whenever I go ahead and make a video like audio like this, I always have to make sure my MacBook's audio or my iMac's, fan is just not on, because if it is, then it's super loud. The iMac, I never have that issue. But for my MacBooks, including these 2018 models, I always have to, be wary of that, which is very weird. Now, I will tell you, with my M1 MacBook, I never had the fans come on at all, not even one time, which was surprising. I was playing Fortnite on it. I was doing so many things on it. I didn't hear the fans at all. And that's a huge statement. I typically run my MacBooks. I do way more work on my MacBooks than my iPhones. For my iPhones, I'm a very light user, but for my MacBooks, I rely on them heavily. And for sure, the 2020 M1 MacBooks, I didn't hear the fans come on at all, which is huge. For these Intel-based MacBooks, as soon as you turn it on, the fans are already on, which is so annoying. So it makes, recording audio very hard. It makes a lot of other things hard too. But for sure, when it came down to it, I really like how the M1 MacBooks are still smooth, still fast, but the fans don't ramp up, which is something that's huge. However, I will tell you, if you already have the 2018 MacBook, and I'll just kind of sum up the video like this. If you have the 2018 MacBooks and you haven't had any issues, the keyboard still works and functions, and you don't really complain about the fan like I do, then I think for sure I would recommend keeping it. Just like I said in the beginning of this video, I would 100% recommend keeping this specific MacBook until the next M1 MacBooks come out. I've said this before and I'll say it again. That is one of the most important things you can do. It's just not even funny, because even then, if you don't even want to, keep your 2018 MacBook any longer, I would still recommend keeping it a little bit longer. and waiting until these other MacBooks get out in the used market, and you can even pick up an M1 MacBook Pro for even cheaper than that. But if that's not your MO, if that's not something you do, then for sure I would recommend waiting. If you have to listen to me, I would recommend waiting until these next M1 MacBooks come out. If you already have a 2018, I would not go out of my way to pick up the 2018 model anymore because of that keyboard issue. But if you're totally okay with that, or if you plan on docking your 2018 MacBook Pro onto a screen and using external keyboard like that Magic Keyboard or something and a Magic Mouse, then by all means go for it. I think that's probably more fine than not. But I will tell you, as I've said before a billion times, probably picking up that M1 MacBook and you don't care about the 4 USB Type-C option or whatever, I think that's a grand idea. I think that's a beautiful option. Like I said before, these MacBooks are set for the future. These M1 MacBooks are made for the future. There's no reason in getting that latest and greatest, MacBook Pro with the 2018 model with the Intel base if it's not going to be lasting as long, or if it's not going to have these crazy software improvements as these M1 MacBooks. So that's kind of where I'm at. I would not recommend picking up an Intel-based MacBook, and I probably would recommend waiting to pick up the M1 MacBook Pro. But if you currently have an Intel-based MacBook, I would say keep it, including the 2018 model. I don't think you're missing out on anything too much right now, but very, very soon, I think in the next year or so, these new software improvements that Apple is going to be bringing in their, MacBooks, that's where you probably want to be at. That's when you want to start getting these M1 MacBooks. Right now, it's kind of okay, kind of not. If you don't want to pick it up, it's okay. But like I said before, these next generation of MacBooks, you're probably going to end up wanting to pick those up. So that really pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.